Hi, everybody. Steve Cady here with our Change 2025 series. And kicking it off, we have two incredible human beings that I have a great deal of admiration for, um, Judith and Fred. And they're accomplished. You can read all about that, and you can go on their website and see their bios and all the crazy, amazing things that they've done around the world. It's pretty impressive. Um, but one of the things I think is really important is my two things I appreciate. One is your commitment to the field of organization development and change, and the behavioral sciences and the human-centric professions, if you will. That the variety of professions that focus on developing human-centered organizations and building the best in organizations. I think your commitment is extraordinary, and I particularly for the field of ODC, which I'm particularly um, care about, is important. And thank you for that. And we have David Bright here from the Academy of Management. The Academy of Management is sponsoring this along with Bowling Green State University, where I'm the director of the doctoral program. Teo and Lisa are here. Teo is the associate director for the programs in the College of Business, Schmidt-Horst College of Business. Lisa is our director. She's one of the graduates, and she's a director for the producer for this program and series. So thank you, Lisa, for all your work. David Bright, thanks for bringing the Academy of Management and the ODC division into this. And a lot of this is supporting a research study around the foundations of this work. So I'm really grateful for all of that, and you too, and your commitment to the field. I think the other thing is, I think that's really important, probably more important than the first point I made, and that is your belief in humanity. I don't think you would do this work and write the books unless you had hope that maybe the world could be a better place. Why put the stuff out there? Why write? Why share? Why do that unless you believe it can help somebody? And I think that's because I think fundamentally you have hope for what's possible in organizations and communities in our world as a whole. And I think the last thing I'd like to say is that I think you exemplify something that's really foundational to the field of ODC, and that is never work alone. And the two of you really exemplify that. I think the seashores are smiling down upon you two. I think that the Axelrods are not smiling down upon you. They're having a lot of fun traveling around the world doing stuff together. But Emily and Dick are another example of that. And so I think your modeling of that is really at the heart of agency, right? It's about, never do this work alone. So we have a really great topic around agency, and I think it's great. Such an important time to bring this concept in because we need this now more than ever. And so today, what we're going to do in this, as kicking off with the series, is we're going to begin with you all. People can see the rest of the people in our series. We have an amazing slate of speakers coming following you two, and we're just really glad. And we'll be spending some time talking with you. You'll be sharing your concepts, and then we'll move into a final 30-minute lightning round discussion around what is the field of ODC, what we call the ODC deep dive. And it'll all be part of a qualitative research and study as we try to start codifying some things around the field to help build a longevity of our field. So again, thank you for making the time and being the first to kick this off. Thank you for that. I appreciate both of you. I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you back to you. Thank you for having us. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to everybody who is associated with making this happen. And we like being first. That's a nice place to be. Fred Miller, Kaleel Jamison Consulting Group. I like you calling some of our work crazy things. That sounds like a good label for it. I appreciate that. And I'm an optimist. Although these times are challenging my optimism more than any other times that I've lived in. But I've always considered myself the biggest optimist. Now I'm probably a good medium optimist. And I want to appreciate the founders. So a lot of what we talk about, we worked with, knew the founders, Ron Lippett, he was on the board of NTL when Judith and I were on the board. I worked with and did workshops with Dick Beckhard. Tony Petrella is the person who got me involved in OD Network. It goes on and on of the list of people who are founders. And so Judith and I always consider ourselves the second generation. And as the the second generation and kind of the oldest children, we feel like we have a kind of responsibility for people not to forget their parents. So it's always nice to bring forth their names and who they are. So we have a slide deck that we're going to go through. It's got more on it than we're going to say. So if you're, and we'll have a thing where you can get a link to our slides so you can get them after this session. One of our colleagues, Shay Miller, my daughter, is going to be doing our slides for us. So Shay, if you could pull up the first slide, that would be great.
And Fred, well,
and Judith,
I was going to say something. While Shay's putting up the slides, I just want to say, Steve, I appreciate everything you said. And different from Edie and Charlie and the Axelrods, Fred and I are not married to each other. So, but we do share almost 100 years of working together when you combine our experiences. So just
yeah, like Janoff and Weisborg.
Exactly. Thank you. Okay, Fred, it's yours.
Next slide. So as far as we know, we're the oldest OD firm, established in 1970 by Kaleel Jamison, since deceased. She was one of the first women doing consulting. She was out in the early days when leaders and others would say to her, "Are you married?" "Yes." "Do you have children?" "Yes." "Who's home with your children?" Like she was the worst mother in the world to be out of the house and down there. And then how's your husband going to eat if you're on the road? So all those kinds of some of the issues that she had to deal with. We're based in Troy, New York, right across the river from Albany, New York. There's 6 of us who work out of the Troy hub here. And then we have 10 consultants. Over time, we've been various sizes. One time we had 50 consultants in the firm. And then I decided having consultants as independent contractors was a lot smarter than having them as employees. So our consultants are all independent contractors, but many have been with us for decades and decades. So we're a management consulting firm that uses organization development technology to bring about large total system betterment. We've stopped using the word change because a lot of people don't want to be changed, but they do want to be better. So we start talking about betterment. A betterment word that came out of the Industrial Revolution, so it's been around a long time, but we find that our clients resonate with we're helping you be better. We're a betterment firm. So system betterment that unleashes agency for all and creates interactions that accelerate results. We're very focused on bottom line. How are we going to help the organization achieve more of its bottom line? It's a bottom line and faster than what its present goals are. And as you've already said, we add up to 100 years of experience in the organization, which is hard and fun to say at the same time. There's something about saying 100 years ago, holy crap. And there's another part about saying 100 years saying, I earned that. I remember those days. Next slide. So if you want to get in contact with us, KGCG at 411@kgc.com. Copy of the slides will be there so you can get a copy of the slides. And we're always putting out, I'm getting ready to send a letter to leaders and others, probably to about 500 people, about our thinking and what we're learning and what we're seeing. So if you'd like to be on our mailing list, feel free to let us know. And we don't send things out every week. So I'm in a little flurry right now, but if you get 3 things a year from us, that would be a lot as it relates to our thinking. Next slide.
Yeah, so one of the things I think that Steve mentioned is, so our new book is called The Power of Agency. You may not be able to read it because of the blurriness. Cultivating Autonomy, Authority, and Leadership in Every Role. And we'll talk some in this session about kind of what led us to thinking about individual and team agency. But we really do think this is like the next important thing as we think about organization development and change or betterment in organizations. So I want to just read, in the book, we do a couple of cases, but I want to just read one, a beginning part of one. And I'd like you to think about, have you ever seen or been a part of a similar work experience? And then we're going to do a poll to see kind of where you are about that. So here we go. The early morning meeting with the CEO and upper level managers of the organization was a good one, and Jamie left feeling optimistic. She was glad she had come in today for this meeting rather than attending virtually from home. She had been with the company for 5 years, was rated a high performer with high potential, and had recently started taking part in these strategy sessions. She appreciated being invited to the table and liked being able to see the big picture, which helped her better understand where her work fit in. As she made her way back to her desk, ideas for new projects bubbled in her mind. She was excited to bounce her thoughts off her team and try out some fresh initiatives. But when she shared her ideas with one of her colleagues, he was not as excited. "There you go again, being optimistic," he said. "You know what usually happens? They act positive in the meeting and then later change their minds." Jamie walked back to her desk and began writing an email to her manager, Christina. But as she began to outline some of her ideas, she felt her energy fading. Even though she was Christina's right-hand person and felt that Christina valued her as a team member, this didn't translate into having the freedom to add value and implement her own thinking. When it came to taking action, Christina treated Jamie like a junior member of the organization, someone who needed constant oversight and supervision. When Christina did give Jamie tasks, or allowed her to implement one of her own ideas, Jamie felt the strings that came along with it, the micromanagement, the second guessing of her actions, and the required frequent check-ins that seemed more about easing Christina's risk-averse mindset than about continuous improvement or coaching and mentoring. In short, Jamie felt smothered. As she finished the email, Jamie sat back and stared at the words on the screen. She knew they were good ideas, but the optimism from the morning's meeting faded in the face of the reality of working at her organization. The more she thought about it, she realized her colleague was right and that her ideas would go nowhere. She had been down this path before, and it was exhausting. Christina, with whom Jamie had a good relationship, still made sure every I was dotted, every T was crossed, and that every idea or project was dissected and discussed with her and others before it could even start to be implemented. Though Jamie knew Christina's intentions were good, her comments instead felt controlling and smothering. This slowed Jamie down, undermined her, and stifled her creativity. Jamie felt as if she was just there to carry out instructions, to act more as a doer than someone with expertise who could truly add value to the organization. Sometimes she felt the organization was run by committee and lacked an entrepreneurial spirit, which in turn negatively impacted its speed and competitiveness. As Jamie leaned back in her chair, she felt the full weight of her frustration. What were all her education, skills, and experience with the organization worth if she couldn't work and contribute to the best of her ability? What was the point of her being there? Maybe she shouldn't put as much effort into her job and should spend more of her energy on life outside of work. Or maybe she should leave the organization altogether. Over the next 2 weeks, Jamie continued to think about what had happened after the meeting and her past experiences while working there. As she reflected on each incident of feeling stifled and smothered by naysaying colleagues or being micromanaged, she thought more seriously about her career options. She reflected, "When I accepted this job, I had 4 other job offers, and 2 of those companies indicated I had an open offer. They really wanted me." As much as she cared about the people in her current company, she'd reached a momentous decision. It was time to move on. She decided to hand in her letter of resignation to Christina. Okay, there you have it, case number 1. So now, next slide, please. I'm going to ask you to think about, to what degree have you either seen or been a part of a similar work experience? Maybe it's a client that you've consulted to in which people are experiencing this. Maybe it's something you've experienced that caused a change in your own life. And we'd like you to put 0 to 10. 0 is not at all. 10 is to a great degree in terms of whether or not you've ever had this. So 0 would be, no, I've never had this experience. 10 is, boy, this has been my life or the client's life that I've been in. And we'll kind of take a quick peek at those numbers as we're putting them in there. Let me see what they said. So we've got a couple of 0s. Let me just here. So somebody fortunate enough to never have experienced that. Thank you, lucky you. We've got 8s, 9s, 10s. Let's see if I can keep on coming in. So the lowest was a 0 and a 4. You go, Francis. And then we've got a number of 10s and 8s. So let's hear a couple of voices maybe about what your experiences were like, particularly from those in the 10s, either what you've seen or been a part of. And maybe Steve can kind of manage that to hear a couple of voices.
Yeah, raise your hand if you want to come in. Let's bring in Eric Sanders real quick if you can unmute him. Hey, Eric, you want to share with us why you said 10?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Well,
I know.
early in my career, I had, this sort of a situation where, I was brought into a company and thought that I had the chance to do a lot of great work. And it proved to not be the case. And so, it gets really frustrating when you have thoughts and ideas and you want to contribute and are not able to. So, I've experienced it. I've seen clients do it as well, but, especially from my own experience.
Thanks, Eric. Good to
Yeah,
see you.
and Linda's another duo in her work around large scale change. But Linda, do you want to unmute and share a little bit about your thoughts? And she scored it an 8.
Sure. And yes, Dean and I are married.
Hi, Linda. Good to see you. It's been a
Oh, how wonderful. Really warms my heart. So it is actually not uncommon with the organizations that we enter that a lot of what we're dealing with is raising people's awareness of the impact they're having by shutting others down.
Nice.
And so, we focus a lot on this particular issue as it comes to helping people make their contribution to the transformation of their organizations. So I see a lot of it, and a lot of it is helping managers and leaders to understand the impact of their behavior and opening the door for their openness to do that. It's far too common.
Thanks, Linda. And it's so good to see you. And you've been doing this work for so many years in terms of trying to create transformational change and betterment. So it's just warms my heart to see you today. That's great.
You as well. You as well. And
So,
Fred.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next slide. That's great. Thanks, Steve. Got a couple of voices in. So, I think
just a comment. We wrote this book, we started writing it about 2 years ago and came out in January. I have a client right now that we're experiencing this, that people feel very smothered. When we were writing the book, the publisher asked us, what's the opposite of agency? And as we thought about it being smothered. A lot of people in our organizations are smothered these days. And this client that I'm in, they're doing quiet quitting. I was working with one of their executives this morning, and they're like, I don't want quiet quitting. If you're going to do quiet quitting, just leave. And I'm like, oh my goodness. But that's the reality of it. But, how do we get the leaders to really understand what's happening? And, this is a client we're beginning to talk about individual and team agency and trying to move it. I'm worried, very worried, that many of our organizations are experiencing this, maybe more than ever. I think a lot of people came out of the pandemic and said, what do I want to do? Do I want to put all my energy into corporation, organization, or do I want to make sure I'm putting time in me and my life? And I think our organizations are at risk of not being as high performing as they have been historically, unless they do some radical changing around how they're operating and how they're treating people. And I really do think there's an alarm at the gate. And so how do we as practitioners, how do we as academics, what do we need to do to really sound the alarm and then try to move organizations much faster than they're moving now? Because the lack of commitment to organizations is increasing, not decreasing. And if you want to be a third or fourth rate country, that's fine. If you want to be in the top 2, it's a bad idea.
Yeah. So I think, Fred, you talked to a lot about why it's important now. We do see this as the evolution of organizations. I think the pandemic, even though for many people are feeling like the return to office and all of those things are trying to take people back, people don't want to go back. And I think you've got a generation who's saying, no, we're not going to live under your rules. And most importantly, we've got knowledge workers who don't want to be smothered, who want to be able to contribute. So I think there are many forces right now that are happening in terms of even in the threat of people losing their jobs. But a lot of people are saying, I'll figure out a life. I'll figure out what works for me. I don't have to be stuck in an organization where I'm not making the contribution, or I'll kind of work outside, really spend my energies in other places in other ways. So we think this is absolutely critical right now. Next slide, Shay.
just a couple more points on that. There's a need for speed in our organizations. I joke, but AI has given us answers in a matter of seconds. And then in many of my clients, it takes them 6 months to decide whether they're going to take the action. A project takes forever. We can't afford it. We just can't. I feel like I had a metaphoric AI patting its foot saying, when the hell are these humans going to agree that I actually had the right good idea at the beginning and start implementing it? So I'm sorry to keep doing this, but we're at risk about this and risk on people. So speed, there's a need for greater information. And AI is going to move us forward. I think the last one is people want to grow and develop, not be in a box and not have no decision-making authority. So how do we expand that so people are growing and that, there's no career paths in most organizations these days. How do we expand people's ability to contribute to the organization? How do we give them the experiences that they don't have to leave the organization to grow? Those are some serious challenges. We think agency, individual team agency, starts addressing some of those challenges.
Next slide.
So these are the books that we've written. And it's funny, that whole saying that as you're living life, nothing really makes sense. You do something else. But when you get towards the end and you look back, it looks like a coherent story. I feel that is about our books. I feel like that, Judith wrote a book about white awareness before people were really talking about white awareness and kind of what it means. Kaleel wrote the book about the nibble theory, really dealing with being a woman consultant and the resistance and the challenge she was getting. The Promise of Diversity was a book that NTL asked us to write. We had 40 people think about it, came out in 94. Again, diversity, what does it mean? We immediately connected diversity and inclusion as we even went in this book. Then we wrote The Promise, the Inclusion Breakthrough, which was the first book ever written about inclusion in organizations, which really talked about a systemic issue, more than just people feeling like they belong. Then the next several books are just behaviors, being big, opening doors, safe enough to soar, which is about interaction safety, change champions, which is about how do you create a process, and now the power of agency. So our understanding and our knowledge has kind of grown and gotten clearer. And we really do see, and I'll talk more about this, that agency is kind of the next part of the journey for us. Next slide. The two books that we're giving most to our clients and talking about is the book about Be Big, where we're working with Merck Pharmaceutical Company. And we're working with a wonderful, wonderful leader named Willie Dees, who's head of worldwide manufacturing for Merck. But people were afraid of him. People were afraid to speak up. He'd have town hall and there'd be crickets in the room. And when we thought about it, if you got a really good leader, join them. If you don't have a good leader, then don't join them or leave them. But if you don't join the good leaders, they're not going to stay committing, giving energy, giving brains to the organization. So we wrote Be Big to really talk about what people need to do individually, what they need to do with their partners, what they need to do to assist others so that people can be big, do their best work together. And then the Power of Agency book is really saying there's something more. A lot of people were acting like, next slide, a lot of people were acting like inclusion was the end. If you look at the bottom of that diagram, starting with exclusive club on one side, if you go all the way across, people were acting like inclusion was the end state. And Judith and I were like, one, there's no end state. There's always something next. And then we started thinking about, so what's next? And that's where agency became something that we started playing with and then writing about. And now we're talking, and now we have clients where we're helping them increase their individual and team agency. This article talks about that evolution of really differences in organizations. There's a reference there. We wrote several articles about it, but one of the more recent ones is referenced in the bottom if you would like to get a copy of it. But it really talks about the change of organization going from a monocultural, we're all the same organization, to one where now people have agency and it doesn't matter who you are, it's what you can contribute to the organization and where the organization wants to go. Next slide.
Just stay on the slide for a minute. Shay, stay on the slide for a minute. And that model that we have here, Francis just acknowledged over there, was based on Bailey Jackson and Evangelina Hovino's work, Mark Chesler's work. The three of them and others collaborated on about multicultural OD. And we really, with permission, have taken that and really expanded it based on our clients and what they've learned. So that's just kind of the antecedents. And I think they developed it around the early 80s or so.
We usually have that reference at the bottom of this article.
That's why. All right, moving on. Thank you, Shay. Move to the next one. So we want to talk a little bit about what is individual and team agency. For us, we think that one of the things that's often been missing is the need for both independence in one's work and interdependence, and the notion of co-creation. So it focuses both that in my work, I have autonomy, authority, leadership in my role, but I also have to be interdependent and co-create with others. And that's where the team element comes in. And so it's really understanding that I have to have an ownership mindset. And really thinking about the fact, one of the CEOs that we work with, Dane Zimmerman, which is a family-owned, $3 billion family-owned business, Hal Yo, who's the CEO, talks about when people have to make decisions, he's asked them, what would you do if this was your company? And so it's really getting people to think about it with that ownership mindset to really step up and have voice. Next slide, please. So our formal definition is ensuring all people of all roles, levels, tenures, identities have the power, influence, and voice to make decisions, to make choices related to their jobs and the betterment of the organization. So agency is not just about me. I can do whatever I want. No, it's really about my role. It's about understanding that there are guardrails. It's understanding that there are places where I can play. There are places where we can play. And there's places where we need to all do that for the betterment of the organization, as well as for myself. So it's kind of like work-life me is important, but it's not just about me. It's really about us. And it's about creating a new we. So I think this is part of, for us, it's really understanding that it doesn't matter whether you are, on the shop floor or whether you're in the C-suite. You have that level of leadership, autonomy, and authority. And Fred and I did a lot of work when Fred said about Merck with the shop floor. And people had knowledge, experience, skills. And a lot of times what would happen is they would bring in the engineers when there was a problem on the line, instead of asking that worker on the line what they thought was the issue. And so what we know is people have knowledge, people have solutions, and often they don't get heard. So it's really understanding that all of that, no matter what your level is, having the autonomy, having the authority, and having leadership. Next slide, please.
Someone mentioned about organizations and not keeping their promise as one of the reasons that people are kind of questioning or pulling back. And I think that's totally right on. I was talking to one of the people, there's a local business paper in the Capital District here in upstate New York. And I was talking to the publisher of it. And he talked about, as he's going around talking about leaders, he's saying that leaders are tired of people keep asking for stuff. It feels like that over the last, 3, 4, whatever years, people in the organization said, we need this. And leaders felt like, I give them that. People said, I need this. And people said, we'll give them that. I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this. And he's saying what he's experiencing is that leaders are saying, enough. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to keep giving because there's no end to this giving. Now, do I believe in that philosophy? Not necessarily. But I think it talks to some of the challenge that we have in our organizations is how do we make sure that the needs of the organization are getting met and the needs of the individuals getting met and the teams are getting met. And there's been a lot of, as many leaders would see it, giving to the team, the organization. And it sounds like leaders are getting a little fed up with that. That's a bad thing. I'm not saying this is good, this is bad, but it's a real challenge that's in front of us. And so organizations keeping their promise, that's got people moving away. And I think that they're probably going to keep less promises. And so how do we make our organizations be high performing? Or how do we bring them together? How do we bring together the people and the leadership and the goals and the principles and the bottom line of the organization so that they can work together? I'm not sure, we live in a country and in a world that's very divided right now. And some of those divisions are inside of our organization. So when people have individual and team agency, What does that mean? It means our obligation to speak up, raise tough issues. Judith said it already, act like an owner. That's a big one. I love that. I think that now I got to make it worth your while to act like an owner. I got to make acting like an owner, not that you give and you don't get. So there's a lot to work with being the owner. Greater opportunity to realize their potential and to do their best work. Next slide.
So kind of the examples of where agency isn't and where agency is. When we worked with Toyota years ago in their marketing and sales organization, and people had no agency at all, they had to make a choice. The CEO, they were going to do an ad, had to decide what color it had to be. So that's kind of the one end of the continuum versus the other end of the continuum in their manufacturing processes. People at Toyota in the manufacturing side could pull the cord, or I guess now it's a button, when there was a problem with the production line, and they could stop the line. So they had it in the production processes, but they didn't have it in their interaction processes. And what we're saying is, how do we pull in every organization where people have the right to pull the cord, stop the line, make a new decision? Over the years, we've worked with the Jacksonville Zoo and Gardens, and one of the things that they've really been working on is agency. And the small example is where, a leader is giving people budgetary discretion, say, use the money as you think fit, instead of having to sign off on every dollar that we have. The other thing that they've done is really working on breaking down silos. So it used to be that when somebody saw a problem and it was in somebody else's area, they'd never say anything. Now that's shifted and changed dramatically, that there's much more of a sense of we. And finally, when the executive director came in, he noticed that nobody would ever speak up in a town hall meeting, regardless of whether there were board members in there or just he was in there. And over the years, as they've been working on getting greater agency, what they have found was now people speak up regardless. They don't care whether a board member's in the room, they don't care whatever, but they're willing because they see this as problem solving together and understanding that the wisdom is in the organization, that they can bring that wisdom. And I also mentioned before, Dan Zimmerman, where people are acting as owners and really understanding that they're working to have what we call interaction safety. We shifted the words from psychological safety to interaction safety, and we did that in our book, Safe Enough to Soar, which was the previous book that we'd written, partly because at the time, psychological safety felt like it was too much mental health focused, and that was still taboo in organizations. And what we're really focusing on, do you have the safety in your interactions to engage? And I think that's a fundamental element of what's needed for greater individual and team agency, that people feel like they can share a silly idea, that they can share a half-baked idea, that they can really share their thinking and not feel like they'll get punished for it or sniped at in some way. Next slide.
I was working with a CEO, and the CEO was meeting with their team at a staff meeting. And during the meeting, the CEO started taking a lot of notes. And this CEO didn't often take notes. I was wondering what the hell was going on. And at the end of the meeting, the CEO said, what I've written down is all the questions or decisions that you were asking me to make that you should have made. So-and-so, you asked me this. Yes, in your authority. You don't need to ask me this. So-and-so, you asked me this. You can make that decision. You don't need me. And so I've had more leaders starting to do that so that we can push. A lot of decisions are pushed up in the organization, more so now than I've seen before. People either are afraid or don't want to, or just, not clear who's got what authority where. And I'm trying to push decision-making down in our organizations because leaders need to be thinking about the future, where we're going, the bigger picture, not making decisions on levels that should be designated to somebody else. So how do we have leaders indicate to people, not that a local bank president here told his people, I want y'all to make decisions. I don't want y'all always coming to me. And when they come to him and they say, well, what do you think we should do about this? What he does is give the dumbest answer he possibly can think of. And then they go, oh, it's okay, well, what would you do? So they're learning that don't come to me with asking me. You bring your thinking, and more than likely what I'm going to do is go with it. And then the last thing, in a session recently with the 100 top leaders of a company, I had them bring in job descriptions of their direct reports and look at those job descriptions, work in small teams, and say, what's in your job description that you should be delegating down the organization, that they should have autonomy over and make decisions in. And so really trying to move that down, because I really do think in the last several years, decades, decision-making has been moving up and up and up. Leaders at the top don't have time to do that. They're swamped. A joke that I tell, if you look at all the books in the world, all of them in the world, and say, what's the definition of a leader? Not one says a leader is a person who goes to meetings all the time. Not one says a leader is somebody who goes, what are our leaders doing? Going to meetings in conference rooms all of the time. Everywhere? No. But a whole majority of them, yes. Next slide.
So one of the things that when we were writing this book, our publisher, Steve Piersanti at Barracola, kept on saying to us, so what's the difference of empowerment and agency? And, there's been a lot written about empowerment over many, many years. It's been a process that people have been trying to instill in organizations. And we really played with this as we thought about it. But we think about empowerment as kind of bestowed on people. We're going to have you get empowered. We're going to give you empowerment. Managers say, you've got the trust of me. You can go do what you want to do. I think we see agency as inherent. And Fred always talks about this story about being at the airport and watching a mother and their child, in which the child is exploring. And what the mother is doing, instead of micromanaging the child, don't go here, don't go there, is just providing boundaries in which the child can play to keep safe, which we talk about in terms of organizations as guardrails. So what we see is that managers' role in agency is to really unleash that, remove the barriers, provide the resources, understand what you need, clarifying your job descriptions, understanding how one's work connects to the mission, vision, and strategy of the organization, as opposed to allowing people to act. It's supporting people when they act. And if they make a mistake, helping them learn and using it as a learning experience. We talked about learning organizations and Peter Senge for years. One of the challenges is really letting managers deal with their letting go of that need to dot every I, cross every T. So what we see with agency is people really taking initiative, really exercising decision-making and authority. And we see this, we talk a lot about unleashing agents, individual and team agency, and really thinking about a manager's role very differently, which we know it's been changing anyway, to really looking at removing those barriers, providing those resources, clarifying the guardrails, connecting to mission, vision, and strategy, and also connecting the dots. Like, who else do you need to connect to in terms of the work that you're doing? So we see this as being a critical differentiator. And obviously people being empowered is a part of it, but it's not the whole story. And we see this as really a bigger picture around that. Okay, Shay, next slide.
I want to talk quickly about 2 more slides and then just open it up to see your comments and thoughts, reflections, make sense. What do you see differently? We talked some of the first, I'm not going to do the ones in yellow. Taking ownership of your work, being accountable for the actions you take, for success and failures and opportunities to learn. And the next yellow going down, using mistakes and failures as a learning experience. We talk about that all the time, but organizations still tend to be on the punishing side of that equation versus that I'm glad you had that experience. You learn from that experience and move on. And then knowing how your work is connected to the organization's mission, vision, and values, and how it contributes to a higher performance of the organization. That's a big for us. That's like core for us. How does what you're doing relate to the mission, vision, and values of the organization? I was with a client yesterday, and they were talking about their planning process and what they get above site. And this is a manufacturing facility and what they do. And then they had a brilliant idea that, you know what, when we get that stuff from above site, we don't actually connect it to what people are doing day to day. Maybe we should start connecting it. Oh, good idea. Our organizations have been sloppy. They have been do, not always enough thinking, connecting in the organization so that people understand, how am I adding value? How can I add more value? Do your job, get it done. How fast? Let me see it. That's a mistake. Let me fix that. Da da da. Let me do it for you. It's quick if I do it for you than if you do it. Da 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 da. It's a losing proposition. It's not going to keep your talent in organizations, and it's slow. Next slide, and then we'll hear some comments. So when people are smothered in organizations, they're micromanaged, withholding trust, the thing that really got us about this, made us think about this, is we have knowledge workers in organizations, but we're not treating them as knowledge workers. We got knowledge workers and we're treating them as worker bees. This is a formula for failure. People are like, okay, well, I'll just do less. We can't do it. We got to treat knowledge. There was such a celebration when we started talking about knowledge workers, and they're going to come in and boy, is that going to be great. And then we're like, well, but I'm not changing in my behavior. Squashing ideas, people not having a chance to bring their thinking. Next slide. Withholding people's decision-making capability, not having a chance to bring their decision-making. Next slide, Shay. Keeping people's job narrow and inflexible. A lot of that, that's all that thing with the Industrial Revolution, right? Let's segment the job down to its least components so that we can have fewer mistakes. Not for knowledge workers. That's the opposite direction. Not allowing someone to take risks that might be wrong direction or fail. We talk about that, but it's not real. So let us stop there. Shay, you can pull the deck down for a minute. We'll come back to slide 20. And let's just hear some thoughts, comments. You can just talk. You can raise your hand, whatever you want to do. It's easier. Jeremy?
Lisa, if you can bring the whole view in of everybody at one big screen, bring the gallery, bring the whole gallery in. There we go.
Jeremy?
Yeah. So one thing that Francis, do you want to share the piece you talked about how an agency and managers' involvement, how middle managers protect upper management?
Yeah, and I say this from more than one experience. Often we have senior managers to come in and tell employees, I want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. Give us your ideas. You have a whole group of middle managers who try to protect senior managers from employees, literally try to protect senior managers, does not have to deal with that level of organization. In addition, they want to protect their precious, powerful access to senior managers that people lower in the organization don't have. So it's not the senior managers. And I also say to them, you're pronouncing it doesn't make it so. You need to infiltrate your middle people who may be blocking. And I say that also as an example of a major motivational problem that got solved at midnight in the overnight shift in a plant because John Doe spoke up and solved a problem that had been a problem for years. And I have to say, as the OD person, I turned out to be the vehicle because I used what he said and took it back to senior manager. So it's just an example how sometimes we have to infiltrate the culture by the way we work with organizations. Sorry, that's so long.
Thank you, Francis. I want to try to hear about 4 more voices really quickly. So Jeremy and Linda, and then a couple more people.
Yeah, and then Lynn and should come pop in, and then I think Max.
Okay, let's do that queue. Let's go through the queue.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I love the two of you. I think you've done amazing work, and I love that you're taking it to agency. A lot of it is really hitting home for me, but I want to ask. I want to ask for your guidance or a question of guidance, right? So I live right outside of DC. Most of my colleagues have just gotten laid off from OD jobs at USAID, or they're working within agencies and organizations who, for example, a CEO actually told a colleague of mine the other day, I don't really give a damn what you feel your agency is because we respond to what's happening in the government. And I don't really have to care. So how does somebody like myself, who's in the field and doing the work and trying to get clients to start even thinking about agency that don't want to do that right now. How can we begin to make that transformation and do it in a way that actually shows we understand what's happening in the current climate? I think is the right way to say that. I
Yeah,
hope that's a fair question, by the way.
Yeah.
I like the question. I have a harsh answer though. Sometimes things got to get worse before they get better. I think what people need to do now is make sure they're taking care of themselves, that they need to find allies that they can partner with and interact with, not believe that they were not value added, but carry who they are and what they've done, and then look for those opportunities. But first, it got to be well. A lot of people have been through a very traumatic experience against all the values that we believe in, as you talk about people even leaving the organization, leaving it with respect and dignity. So
Right.
one thing is I really, one, it's a sad time. And two, I really want people to take care of themselves. Judith, if you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, echo everything Fred said, ditto, ditto. But I think also it's getting people to get back to self as their instrument and to think about where can I add the most value? One of our friends, very close friend, worked in the AI world, and she decided that she was going to start looking at her skill sets differently, and she ended up with a job in the corporate sector. So some of this is also to really do the self work, take care of myself, but also take a hard look at where can I add value. And I think that leader who says, I don't care about what you want or agency or whatever. I think the other thing is if they're going to accomplish the mission of what is wanted externally, they still need to engage their people to accomplish that. And so, getting people's thinking, getting people behind them is going to be critical, or they're going to lose that talent as well. Yeah. But, I live in DC, Jeremy. I understand the situation we're living in. And I think this is a time now for people to spend the time internally getting themselves healthy. Support systems are critical, and to be creative and thinking about where can I add the most value. Even if I've given my whole life to international development, for example, maybe I need to be where I can add value at this point.
Yeah, and network is critical during these times, more so than ever. Isolation is the enemy. Linda?
Yeah, thanks. So two quick things for me. First of all, music to my ears, everything you're talking about. It's like, wow, beautiful. The word that comes to my mind about the deliverable of what we're trying to do in organizations is helping leaders, managers, employees feel as if they belong. Mm-hmm. So including them is one thing to ask of them, but the other is that they realize I have a place here. I am at home here. I have something I can contribute. And so we work a lot with the internal psychology of helping people recognize, as well as the culture, that's possible for them. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I want to talk about is a challenge that we're experiencing right now. And that is we're working with the CEO of a utility, and she is a strategist, and she really gets what is required to define a different future for their organization. And asking her executives she's giving agency to her executives. What we're discovering is that most of the executives came up the ranks as operators. Mm-hmm. They're not wired to strategy.
Right on.
They don't have the experience or the knowledge base. And so they're excited about being able to contribute, but what they contribute is not about the future. It's an incremental change from the current state. And so the challenge for us is working with them to move them along without being judgmental or critical, but supporting the CEO to recognize there's only so fast that she can move the organization, because it's not just up to her. Right. And so it's a challenge, how to work with these folks to help alter their wiring when they can't even see it.
Right. So and organizations are in a world of change, and things are moving fast, and you got outside threats, and you have these internal things that you need to get right, or you're not going to be able to address those outside threats.
Right.
That's a lot of CEOs. I would say about people all the time, this is the hardest time I've ever seen for a person to be a senior leader in an organization.
Yeah.
Johnson.
And I think, Linda, when people have moved up in the organization, don't have the strategy skills, part of it is how do you upskill people to be able to think bigger, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's one of the challenges for many people. Do you have the right people to do the right work at this time in the organization?
Absolutely. It's a tough question. It's a tough love question for the CEO.
Absolutely, because a lot of loyalty, history, all of that.
So we have two more people we can have time to hear from, and then we have a couple of things we want to do to close, and then I think then there's going to be some questions coming from Steve. Who are the next two, Steve? Do you remember?
Yeah, so we can go Max and then Lynn, and then we can wrap up.
Good.
Great. Thanks. I really am loving this. I'm loving the focus on agency because it feels really affirming of people's humanity, really, which I think is part of what is needed these days. And I'm curious, I put in a few things in the chat about psychological empowerment, which, this feels to me very, aligned with that, which is, a construct that's been around for 30 years and pretty well researched.
Right.
And, and it's, to some extent, it's the self-determination part, but really what you're talking about is all those different dimensions of impact and meaning and self-efficacy. And so I'm curious how you see that relationship of how your idea of agency fits in with that, which I think is very different from how a lot of people talk about empowerment, whether it's in organizations or even in kind of community change making contexts where there's this idea of empowerment as bestowing something on people. And then the other question I've got is around how this shows up in teams. I was really drawn in by the title and that little teaser. And I know we don't have a lot of time, but if there's anything else you can say about that, that'd be great.
I mean, first of all, I think all of our work is built on previous work, right? We didn't just invent it from the air. It's so I love the psychological empowerment. I don't know the literature well, but I think that's an important, it's like this is all built on other knowledge bases. And I think that's important. The other thing we do in the book is we talk through each chapter about what does this mean for individuals? What does this mean for managers, the mid-manager level? What does this mean for senior leaders? What does this mean for organizational change? So I think we kind of dive more deeply into teams as well. How do you manage the intersections between individual agency, mid-level managers, all of that? And what are some of the questions that need to be asked? And we also do self-assessments for every level of system for people to think about, am I exercising the agency that I want to exercise? Where are there opportunities? So we kind of give more of a how-to in the book than we're talking about today. So thanks, Max. More to come.
Good.
And I think around teams, we're really talking about giving teams more agency and not have teams do something and then it's checked and then it's checked and then it's checked. How do we make sure those teams, when they have a charge, are able to move that as quickly as possible and that they don't need to go to a 29-step approval process?
And clarity also, sorry, Fred, about what's my responsibility and my deliverable, what's our deliverables. Because I think those boundaries too need to be clear. Like, where can I run and make a decision? Where do we collectively need to make a decision? Not everybody means everybody. Not everybody needs to be in every decision or every piece of the work. So it's really differentiating is part of that. So I know, Lynn, we got to get to it.
and I was just one comment. And the question is, do we have the right people? If we have the right people, treat them like the right people. Don't treat them like the wrong people that you got to keep fixing. Lynn?
Yeah, I was just going to add that when we talk about organizations and leadership, we tend to focus on the broader organization. But in times of change and chaos, I think it's very helpful to, remind leaders at all levels that it's still possible to create a microcosm of agency in the mini team culture. So if you're the leader of that team, deciding, okay, as a team, what's our key deliverable? What do we control? What's within our control? What we could possibly escalate and what's completely out of our control. It's not going to change in the foreseeable future. Let's put it aside. That's the parking lot. But what can we work on ourselves in creating that alignment for every individual to the deliverable that the team has to work on. So that kind of agency in a microcosm can create an environment of safety and calm and reassurance that allows individuals to operate when you have a broader environment of chaos.
Absolutely.
Right on.
Yeah, and safe enough to soar, we talk about islands of safety, so I think about we create these islands. Now, the challenge, of course, is creating a whole system that has that level of safety for people. But I think you're absolutely right. It doesn't mean just because the organization is that way, we can't create that together. So,
yeah, because sometimes you can't create the whole organization if the organization is still too broad a chaos, or
right.
like we're seeing a lot today in these days. At least, whoever is within your umbrella sphere of control, you can work with them to create some calmness as best as you can.
And when you create that model, then others may follow. Like, I want what she's having.
Yeah.
Steve, we probably need about 4 or 5 more minutes, and then we can
go to the quick
Jay,
round.
go to slide 22, please.
So I think somebody in the chat had mentioned that this was an organizational transformation. We agree. We see this as the need to create interaction safety. I'll just go for people's thinking to get their wisdom. There we go. We know that the answers are in the organization. People have that knowledge. It's what Dialogic OD has taught us, is basically being able to harness that energy, information, what people see. And we need senior leaders' commitments to the change process and modeling new behaviors. But we needed managers moving from being a checker to removing those barriers. And we need individuals and teams also taking on greater decision-making and ownership. So it's a total systems change, or a total systems betterment, if you will. And the next slide, please, Shay. So what you'll see on the next slide is a detailed description, a detailed model of the 10 steps that we've identified in unleashing agency in an organization. Some highlights, we go into each of these in the book itself, is understand, this is classic OD. Understanding the need for change, initial positioning of that change, implementing the change process and continuous improvement. We have tools for each of those. Some of the questions that we would ask, or having leaders look at, having middle managers work. So we really kind of walk you through all of those elements for the systemic betterment effort. But it is systemic. And, as Lynn said, we can do some of that in a team. But if you're really going to transform an organization, you really need the organization to say, this is critical to our success. This is what it looks like. This is what it isn't. As Fred said, agency is and is not. And everybody's going to have to be different, because this is not something that for many people, they had agency and it was kind of taken out of them. They were told, don't do this, don't do that. So there are real examples from our clients as well, in which we talk about moving through the process. So maybe if we do another one of these, we can walk through each of the steps at another time. All right.
Next slide, just 2 more things quickly.
Yeah.
This is a way of evaluating the progress of change. We do have the reference of where it came from at the bottom, but it really talks about going from initial awareness to people, the culture, being that mastery around that change. It's a great model. It's easy, but it really helps the client be clear and us be clear about where we are in the change process. And slide 28, Shay.
So just so you know, whoops, you're going to the last one, Fred?
Yeah.
Okay, go.
So this is our dedication to the book that we love. We dedicate this book to the people who have toiled under the challenges of workplaces where they were not fully valued, where they did not receive all the thanks and rewards that they deserved, to the people who had more to give and more thought for improvement to share, and all the people who have made the progress of the 21st century possible. And if fully unleashed with agency, will make this an even better century for human advancement. There is much work to do, and we know that we humans can do it. we celebrate our journey to even higher heights. And with that, we'll take down our slides and turn it to Steve.
Thank you. That's great. And that goes back to the very beginning when I said your hope for humanity and your belief in what is possible. You wouldn't write that unless you believed it, and that you really believed that everything you were talking about today. Great discussion. Thank you all for your comments. And we're going to shift gears to something really interesting. So I invite you to jump in. Some of you may be familiar with the sports shows in America, the United States, where they have a timer and they ask somebody some questions, and it's kind of a quick fire set of questions. Well, with David Bright and Ignacio Pavez and Danny Manfort and myself, we've been doing some work to try to codify and put evidence behind the field. And we want to go and take more of a grounded approach to really going back and asking, and grounded means kind of from the ground up, kind of start looking at what are the foundations of the field. A lot of people have written on it, but we want to kind of bring all of that together. And we want to ask our speakers at each one of our sessions as the final deep dive into ODC questions in 5 areas. So those 5 areas, it's in the link, and I just put it there. You can click on the link and see that. And we're going to ask everybody that. We're going to do some qualitative analysis, put it into a report, be sharing it in different ways. And it's just the beginning of this, not the end. We get a lot of iterations in codifying and putting things together and building frameworks. So with that, we got 5 areas. We're going to spend a little time in each. And to begin, Judith and Fred, if you could let's talk about defining the field and how you define or describe OD and C, Organization Development and Change, today, and how has your view shifted over time? And what sets ODC apart from related disciplines in the human-centered change, the other disciplines? And how is it being reshaped by the current and global organizational challenges? Granted, we could talk forever. This is top of the mind, kind of quick, just kind of a deep dive in the most important things that you want to say.
And answer all those questions at once.
Yes. we got 4 more areas after this.
Fred, do you want to start or you want me to start?
No, you start.
Okay, so when I think about OD, I think it's a process of plan change, emergent change, systems change that utilizes behavioral, organizational science concepts. It's scholar practitioners. It's really helping to create more effective organizations to achieve organizational goals, and enabling people to learn and grow and develop their capabilities. So I think some of that's based on some of David Jamison's work. We also were together for the OD gathering over 3 years. We brought together a couple of hundred people to think about that. And there we talked about it being a disciplinary field of scholars and practitioners, working collaboratively with organizations and communities to develop system-wide capacity for effectiveness and vitality, grounded in the organizational and social sciences. How's that for a mouthful? Okay.
That's great.
I would just add, that old model of unfreeze, change, refreeze. And now it's unfreeze, change, and continue to change. There's no refreezing in the world that we're living right now. And then talk about Bob Marshak and Jarvis about dialogic OD being kind of key and core to how we and others have done the work.
Yeah, great, thank you. And has there been any specific shift that's impacted your view of ODC today?
I think for me, what's shifted is I think the move from diagnostic to dialogic and understanding that the answer is in the system and really understanding and looking at the whole system change, I think is critical. I think complexity theory has added a layer from when we first began. So I think some of the things about looking at the patterns and what's happening in the organization. I think Kathy Dannemiller's work and others about whole systems change, getting the whole system in the room, has impacted a lot of the work. Although I think about when Fred and I first started work in 1985, first intervention I was involved with Kaleel Jamison was bringing the whole system into the room. So I think these things have shaped, morphed. Speed has impacted things in a way that I think we've never before. So those would be some of the top of mind things about how it's.
Yeah, that's really good.
I think Lewin's unfreezing, when we thought about unfreezing, changing, and refreezing, that was a mantra as I think about it when we first began the work. And, now there is no refreezing, as Fred said. So that I think has been a major shift in terms of thinking about organizations.
And I also want to give credit to our clients. we've worked with some senior leaders who have been really smart about change and have helped us learn about change. So I think that it's no longer we come in skilled and they're unskilled around this, but we come in with a set of skills, they have a set of skills. And as we work together on that, we produce what's best for the organization.
Yeah, that's really, really good. And so we move into the next area, the theories, models, and frameworks. What are the most important theories and models and frameworks that have informed your work?
There's many. I mean, when I think about it, one of the things Fred and I were talking about this morning is that we were involved with national training labs in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and many of the people here have been as well. And we would go to sunrise seminars where people were just beginning to think about their ideas, So many of the founders of the field were people that we were involved with and connected with. I think about, for example, Ron Lippert we were on the board with. We know Beckhart, we know Bennis, we know Benny. I mean, many of the early founders whose works were there, Shine. I mean, all of those people, Elsie Cross, Edie Seashore. I mean, lots of people who were, beginning to write in this field and beginning to think about this field in the 60s, 70s, 80s, were people we had exposure to. So I think Mark Weisbord, I think about whole systems change. Peter Block, when Fred was at Connecticut General, Peter Block was writing Flawless Consulting, and he was in the back of the room when Fred was consulting. I mean, so we are very fortunate in this age of being in this next generation of OD people to really have been exposed to and worked with many of those people. I don't know, Fred, I'm
Yeah, no, I love that. Every time you say that list, we say that list of names, my heart sings. I don't know if we said Herb Shepherd, and we called his place Fort Courage. And it was here in, Connecticut. I lived in Connecticut at the time. And that was a good place to just go and hang out and be around Herb Shepherd and hear all these people, all their wisdom, as with y'all on the phone, and sharing that wisdom, and how freely they shared their thinking, how little they said, this is mine, and how much they said, this is ours. This is for me adding value and thinking to the thing. Why I joined the field wasn't the technology at the time. It was I met people either in Bethel, Maine with NTL or going to Fort Courage with Herb Shepherd. And I just said, whatever the hell these people are doing, I want to do it. Because if this is attracting people of this quality, I want to be around them. I may never be like them and maybe never be of the quality that they are, but breathing air with them is worth my life. And
that's great. Anybody else you'd add? People are writing in things like Peter Vail and Bob Tannenbaum.
Absolutely. And I just want to give a shout out to Francis. Francis and I were in graduate school together in the early 70s. So we've been on this journey together for a long time. I knew Francis even before I met Fred.
If I had it, Judith, I would show you the stone that Dick Beckhart used to leave a note for me as my mentor. But yes to that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. And then is there maybe one model that you go back to a lot, maybe a framework, a conceptual framework that you've gone back to that's influenced your work? Is there one or two that you really that you draw from, see a connection to? I know Unchange, Unfreeze, Change, Refreeze is one, and it's how it's evolved.
I think Mark Weisbord talking about the boxes and talking about addressing all the components of the system was really, really helpful for me, taking it out of a framework of people and human relations and interacting to saying this has got to be a system thing. If you don't check all those boxes, if you don't address the system, it's not going to change. Yeah, you can have short-term success, but you're not going to have system-wide success. So I would give a lot of credit to being with him, working with him, and reading his book.
Yeah.
The other thing that changed for me, because I was doing work before I started working with Fred around racism issues and gender issues, et cetera, was Kaleel's article on affirmative action as an OD change intervention in 1978 was fundamental because it basically said that this work on diversity that we were doing then really needed to be connected to social systems change. So that was really instrumental. Bailey's multicultural OD model in terms of understanding that it was a developmental path. You couldn't just get there with a light switch. has really shaped our ability, as we said, and expanded that notion in terms of how do you get to agency. So I think those models too were important, and self as instrument. The whole notion, I mean, and about understanding that the most important tool, it's not about tools in your toolkit. It's about who you are and understanding your identity, understanding your skills, your hooks. All of those things is so fundamental as well, because I can't be a great practitioner unless I know myself and do my own work too. So I worry that now a lot of people are coming into the field and like, what's the tool I can have? And this is much more than tools. It's you are the tool. And
Right.
you can't deal with, courage and conflict and differences, etc. Will you be effective in this work?
That's
So
I was on the board with Dick Beckhart for a while, and Dick Beckhart came out of theater. He used to put on theater productions. That's what Dick Beckhart did. Then he became an OD consultant. But he became OD consultant because it connected, because it put on a play, it put on theatric. You got to bring all those pieces together and all those dynamics. And he brought that thinking to everything that he did. So his base was theater, not all the literature. It wasn't all written then. And it was just incredible how he would see the system and think system all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, there one more thing, Steve. Back to Shepard for a minute. I mean, one of the things, Herb Shepard's rules of thumb for change agents and the OD practitioner in the 70s also laid out what I think are like fundamental rules for every OD practitioner and change practitioner in terms of staying alive, lighting many fires, start where the system is, don't build hills as you go.
Wow.
All of those things are so important. And to understand that, like seeing others' efforts as important for your efforts and not being in competition with your efforts. I think they've been a guiding light to a lot of our practice as well.
That's great. This is so awesome. So let's shift to the competency piece. And I know there's a lot of different ways to think about it, but you might have your top 3, 5 for practitioners doing this work. What are I said 5 to 7, but it's 3 to 5, whatever, that are really critical to have that you look for when you look at consultants that are successful and you look for people that you work with? What are those 3 to 4, 5 competencies? In practicing it.
So I've already said knowing self, critical, foundational. Can't do this work without it. It's not all in your head. Understanding and having a foundational theory base and understanding theoretical models and values that guide your work, I would say, is critical. Courage. You got to have courage to speak up. You've got to have the ability to deal with conflict. One of my key things, and I wrote an article about this years ago, is understanding that resistance is part of the change process. And I remember when I went through neurolinguistic programming training, one of the things that they said was there are no resistant clients. And I went, whoa, you haven't been in my client systems. And they said, no, the issue is once you label somebody as resistant, you lose your skills in looking at creative ways to engage them. And that has been like a mantra for me. So I don't want to label somebody as resistant. It's like, what do they need to join? What do they need that's either they're fearful about or that they're concerned about that I need to hear so that we can adapt? Let's see. And then clearly tying our work to the organization's mission, vision, and strategies. That this has to be tied. It's not just change for change's sake. It's not just doing it because it feels nice. It's like, how does this make the organization better? And Fred, you might have 2 more that you want to add.
2 is right number. We were doing work at Toyota, and the head of HR there, as he was talking to his team, was talking about us. And he said, these consultants are different than the other consultants we've had. They had all the big name firms thing because they care. And when he said that, I almost wanted to cry because I feel like if you don't care about the client, care about what the organization is, you shouldn't work with them. And the consultants that we hire in this firm, if you don't care, don't do the work with them. I want you to bring that to it because it'll help you be smart. And the client will see that and feel that and trust you because we know this. Clients have to put a hell of a lot of trust in us and a hell of a lot of faith in us. And if they know we care, that's part of it. So that's one. The other one I would say is I got to be okay being fired. I got to be okay saying I'm going to push. I was working many years ago. I was working with Apple Computer. And I said to the leader, we were talking about what to do. He says, I'm going to do that. I'm going to say, I don't think you should do that. And he said, no, I'm going to do that. And he went and did it. And it blew up. And I came back and he said, God, that was a, I said, well, I told you, I didn't think you should do it. He said, Fred, I'm paying you to help me not make mistakes. So you are still at fault for this because you didn't stop me. And I was like, holy shit, how did I get that job? But what I said to myself was, if I feel strongly that a client's going to make a mistake, I'm going to put my body across the railroad tracks. I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it. And maybe at one point I stop, but if they're not going to be able to say to me again, Fred, I couldn't hear you, or Fred, you didn't make your point. They're going to say, yeah, you made the point. I owe it to my clients to give them my best wisdom, and I owe it to my client to help them not make big mistakes. And I'm willing to take the hit for that. I'd rather them say, you told me, and I heard you, and I tried to do something differently, than Fred, you speak too softly.
That's like the Hippocratic Oath for the field.
That's great.
You know, right? So now let's shift to scholars. Scholar practitioners, scholars are important to our work. What are some important competencies of a scholar that they need to have, particularly within the context of ODC?
Me, you, Fred. Okay, I'll go. One of the things, I was an academic before I became a consultant. So this is kind of near and dear to my heart. And I was on Fielding Graduate University's Board of Trustees. I think scholars need to not work in isolation. They need to work in partnership with practitioners. I think it's understanding the context of organizations. This is years ago, a number of us who were consultants were brought to Princeton by the sociology department because they wanted to get into organizations to do research. And so we presented and we talked about what they needed. And they were like, no, you've got it wrong. This is the research we want to do. But they weren't listening to us in terms of what we thought they needed to be able to enter an organization to do their research. So I would say you need to be very connected to the context in which you're doing research. It's important and necessary. They have to share the OD values and theoretical underpinnings. They have to listen to practitioners to identify the key issues to focus on their research. And I would say for scholar practitioners who are scholars, they need to publish their work more. So I would say that there's a lot of people who are doing great work in organizations, are thinking partners, or thinking of new thoughts about the field. I would say they need to publish as well. So to me, it's a both. And the interplay between the two and the collaboration between the two, I think, is essential. And I years ago, I was brought into an academic institution to talk about their scholarship. Please don't do all your scholarship on college seniors or college students. It's not, Carol's laughing her head off. The population doesn't reflect the organizations in which we work. I want you to have a population and a sample size that actually reflects a diversity of thought, opinion, ideas, perspectives. I'll stop there.
That's awesome. Fred, anything you want to add to that?
No, let's keep going.
That was pretty brilliant, huh? Man, that was spot on, like a trustee that knows what she's talking about, too.
Why do you think I've been with her for over 40 years?
Oh, I for sure, man. I tell you what, you two are the best, almost. I should say, if we had the other duos on here, we have to say they're the best, but all of you collectively are the best. But today you're the best. So let's kind of wrap up, because you've touched on all the questions here. But with the last one, I'd love to hear your bookshelf, but also your sort of your digital article shelf. What would be some key books that you would say, make sure you read these books, or articles, make sure you read these articles, or make sure you touch on it? What would be some of those things that you'd want to make specific articles, like the OD 6-pack, for example, or some of the other,
Well, books, The Accidental Practitioner is a great book. Anybody who I bring in a firm and start working with, we give them that book, Accidental Practitioner. Obviously, Flawless Consulting by Peter, Productive Workplace by Marv. But I think journals, OD Review is a great journal. It's a good publication. You got JABS, you got OD Change Management Journal. NTL periodically puts out Practicing OD. And then reading what leaders are saying. The CEO of Netflix has written a book called No Rules Rules. No Rules Rules. It is great. It's one of those books I can't read fast because I have to reflect on each chapter. But it speaks about the kind of culture they have at Netflix, which is good to say because a lot of companies respect them as a very successful enterprise. And it speaks to all the change stuff that we all would agree with. So they're speaking, he and his co-writer are speaking our language and giving some very good messages. I'm using it in some of the documents that I'm giving to our clients.
You know, the only other thing is I still have my Addison Wesley series from Basic OD that has Beckhart, and I don't remember all the authors in it. It's a little tiny box like this. And
Called the six pack.
The six pack. Those many things. I gave away a lot of my books because I'm like semi-retired, but I'm not giving away my Addison Wesley series. So I don't even know if it's in print anymore, but that was fabulous. I mean,
I am a big fan of playing chess, the board game, and I have my grandson playing chess with me. We were doing work with change agents internal to an organization, and we brought in a chess master to spend a day with them, teaching them how to play chess and think about strategy. A lot of people in organizations don't know strategy. I mean, I went to an NTO course by Peter Vail to learn about strategy 1,000 decades ago. But strategy is not just 1 and 1 is 2. As he always talked about, strategy is not the moon is where it is. I'm here. I take a shot and I go shoot to the moon. Strategy is knowing the moon's going to move. And the strategy is figuring out where it's going to be at that point in time when the intersection takes place. That's also true about culture change. I always say to our clients, the current culture is stronger than what we're trying to do. We got to survive while that current culture is still dominant, while we're building up the new culture. And at some point in time, we'll cross that threshold, and then the culture that we're trying to create will pass the current culture. But don't think that's going to happen in a day, a week, or a month. It's a strategic process to have that process to take over for what the current culture is. Because when we start, the current culture is stronger than us. It can kill us.
That's awesome. Well, really great. So for all of you out there, if you could type in to the chat, what's one thing you're going to do or remember from today? Just the one thing. Pick one thing you're going to do or remember from today and put it into the chat. And is there a final comment of goodbye and thoughts for us from you two?
I think you've heard from my voice. I love this work. I love this field. I love all you and all the partners in it. We have changed the world, and we will continue to change this world. This world needs us. It needs the work that we do. And when you find, quote unquote, good leaders or leaders who want to learn, they understand that what we're talking about is what the future is and what the present needs to be if they're going to reach their goals. So thank you, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add was just watching the chat, there's so much more wealth of knowledge that everybody has. And collectively, we need all of us together to not only transform our organizations, but to keep each other healthy and supported. So thank you for being here today. It's great to see so many people I love and the new people that I'm learning to love as well.
Yes. Well, everybody, keep on keeping on. Do good work. Keep the faith. And thank you all for being here. We have another one next week. They'll put it in the chat there. You can click on the Change 2025 series. We have some just wonderfully generous human beings that are a part of the series. So continue to join us, and thanks for being here. It was just a rich conversation. I'm so glad it's recorded so we can look at it and come back and revisit it again. Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Fred. Have a great rest of the day.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Stay safe. Be well. Thank you, Steve.
Bye for now.